The LA Kings signed two more players, and we profile the Kings' leading goal scorer, Trevor Moore, on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Coming up on today's show, we're going to do a player profile of Kings leading goal scorer Trevor Moore, plus an interesting trade rumor we'll talk about, and an old friend maybe turning up in a new place. That and more, but we begin with the LA Kings doing some business and signing a couple of players. We talked about this at the end of yesterday's show, but we want to get into it more today. It was reported on Wednesday, confirmed today, that the LA Kings did agree on a new 2-year deal with restricted free agent forward Akil Thomas. He's going to make $775,000 per season. The first year of the deal is a 2-way deal, while the second year of the contract is a 1-way deal. Now, if you don't know, a 2-way deal means that a player gets paid a certain amount if he plays in the AHL and a certain amount if he plays in the NHL. Obviously, it's always more if you play in the NHL. That would be the $775,000. Don't know what Akil Thomas would make if he played in the AHL for next season. Now, the 1-way deal means that you get paid that amount of money regardless of where you are. Doesn't matter if you're in the AHL or the NHL, you get paid that amount of money, $775,000. Now, I don't know exactly why they are having a 2-way deal in the first year of this deal. I can only assume maybe there's some salary cap implications that I'm not aware of. But if the Kings were to end up sending Akil Thomas to the AHL, he'd have to clear waivers, and he's not waiver exempt, and he probably wouldn't clear waivers. So I guess the good news is it's probably a moot point, because it appears that Thomas is going to get an opportunity to be a full-time NHL player with the Kings bottom six next coming season. That is barring something very unforeseen, but it looks like positions are going to be available in the Kings bottom six. So I will admit, I did not see this coming for Akil Thomas, but I'm pleased to be wrong about this. Going into last season, I didn't anticipate him playing well enough to be given a shot the following season, or even to get a call up last season, but he was able to stay healthy. He's had some injury issues in his career, set career highs with 22 goals and 46 points in 64 games for the Ontario Reign, and obviously opened a lot of eyes with his brief call-up and making his NHL debut last year with the Kings, where he played in 7 games and had 3 goals. Now, again, Thomas injury-free and able to play a full season, and he took advantage of it, and he's to be given full credit of it, and took advantage of his brief opportunity at the NHL level, which, again, I think opened a lot of eyes. He's 6 foot tall, 195 pounds, 24 years old, was a second-round pick of the Kings in 2018. He's not afraid to go to the net, and if he can stay healthy, he is the type of player that GM Rob Blake and head coach Jim Miller talked about when they said for next season the Kings need to be more aggressive in and around the net, and Akil Thomas is that kind of a player. I feel confident, and I would say I'm even excited about seeing what Akil Thomas can do by being given a shot as a full-time NHL player. I think we should also, though, maybe temper our expectations a little bit, because it's very, very unlikely we're going to see him do things like score 3 goals in a 7-game span. But that doesn't mean that I could be wrong about that. I hope I am. I was wrong about him before. But again, he can still, even if he's not going to put up those kind of numbers, which I think is unlikely, he can still be an effective role player for the Kings, play that aggressive style, go to the net, be a fourth-line energy kind of guy who can chip in with a few goals here and there. And as we talked about a little bit on Wednesday's show with Carl Balikian. Having cost-effective players in your bottom six as well is certainly something that teams want to have because you can obviously spend that money elsewhere to upgrade in net or on the defense or in your top six. So having those kind of players that can fill a role, be effective, and make less than $1 million, add it all together, it's a great opportunity for Akil Thomas and a good situation for the LA Kings if he can even show a glimpse of what he did last year in his brief stint with the LA Kings. And again, play the kind of role that they look to play for him to play, be that kind of aggressive guy, go to the net, good forecheck, be physical at times. Again, excited the Kings were able to sign Akil Thomas. Knew they would, but they've got that deal done and looking forward for him to get a chance in the Kings' bottom six next season. As for the second signing that the Kings made, they announced this officially on Wednesday that they did re-sign forward Andre Lee. He gets a one-year contract extension, also worth $775,000. It is a two-way deal for next season. The 23-year-old just completed his second full season in the organization, playing 36 games for the Ontario Reign. He had 8 goals and 5 assists for 13 points, but also kind of like Akil Thomas, opened some eyes by what he did in the playoffs. 8 games, 4 goals for the Ontario Reign in the postseason. He's got good size, 6'5", 210 pounds. He has played a total of 105 games in the AHL for the Reign over parts of 3 seasons. He got a little taste of professional action 3 years ago, just a handful of games. Then last season was his first full pro season. And then this season took it to another level. Now, the total, as I mentioned, of all the games he's played, 105 games, he's got 14 goals and 10 assists for 24 points. That may not wow you, but it's the progression he made from this past season, from the season before, I think that's opened some eyes. Now, he was a 7th round pick of the LA Kings, so getting great value for a player that could be, he's definitely a solid AHL contributor, maybe could be next season an NHL contributor, but again, a 7th round pick that you re-sign, that's obviously a good sign that you've made very good picks later in the draft. He played 3 years at the University of Massachusetts Lowell before the Ontario Reign signed him. He is originally from Sweden. He did miss 2 months last season with a leg injury, and that certainly affected his numbers. And again, those numbers might not jump off at you, 6 goals and 9 points in 58 games, but had he played, 8 goals and 13 points in 36 games was the total for Andre Lee. Now, had he not gotten hurt, he likely would have had double digits in goals and probably around 30 points. And again, that may not seem like much, but when you compare it to what he did the previous year, where he had just 6 goals and 9 points in 58 games, obviously a step forward for Andre Lee. Can he take another step forward this coming season with his size and skill? That could, again, make him an option, probably not for this season, but maybe the following season to play a bottom 6 role if that becomes available for the LA Kings. So a depth signing in the organization for the LA Kings. Akil Thomas, obviously the big signing, and then Andre Lee, a nice signing as well for the Kings as they continue to go through the business of constructing the roster for next season. So with those 2 signings, the Kings have signed 6 players so far since the season came to an end for the Kings. Akil Thomas, Andre Lee, of course, backup David Rittich was the first player signed in the offseason, 1 year, $1 million. Then the Kings signed prospect Caleb Lawrence to a 3-year entry-level deal. He'll be with the Ontario Reign next year. And they also signed Reign role players, defenseman Joe Hicketts and forward Taylor Ward. And Ward is a guy who's shown some promise, but likely those guys will be in Ontario again next year. They both got 1-year deals worth $775,000. So those are the signings so far for the Kings this offseason. Still, obviously, a lot of work to be done with restricted free agents, Quentin Byfield, Jordan Spence, Arthur Kallia, Blake Lizotte, and Carl Grundstrom, and decisions to be made on unrestricted free agents, Matt Roy, Cam Talbot, Victor Arvidsson, and Trevor Lewis. Real quick, speaking of Arthur Kalliev, you likely know that he has requested a trade. And I did see something from Spencer Lazary, who works for the Hockey News. Apparently, he covers the Kings as well as the Arizona, now Utah NHL team. And I saw that he had thrown out there a possible trade between the 2 teams that he covers. and he suggested a swap of Arthur Kaliev to the Arizona/Utah team for their backup goalie, Kirill Velmelka. He added it would also likely take the Kings adding a draft pick as well. He had thrown in there a fourth rounder. And I do actually kind of like Kirill Velmelka. We had talked about him in previous shows as maybe being a possible option for the Kings. I'd be curious to see what he could do for a better team, but I'd have to say I give thumbs down to this trade possibility. I don't think Kirill Velmelka is in any way, shape, or form an upgrade over Cam Talbot. It's not like he's a younger guy who's not really getting a chance for a bad team, and maybe he goes on a good team and you develop him into a goalie now and in the future. He's 28 years old. So he's already kind of what he is what he is, I think, at this point, although he could be better with a better team. But when you add a draft pick in there as well, the Kings already have David Rittich, so he wouldn't be any kind of a backup/project. So an interesting trade, and it's always fun to kind of throw these things out there. But an Arthur Kaliev for Kirill Velmelka and a draft pick trade, I'd say no thanks if I was the LA Kings. But maybe you feel differently. Up next, we are going to look at Kings' leading goal scorer from last season, Trevor Moore, talk about where he could go for the upcoming season. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to NBA, NHL, or whatever sporting events you're interested in. I bought tickets to NFL and NHL games using Gametime, and I'm a very satisfied customer. The app is super easy to use and navigate. Just go on and tap on the listings, sports, music, shows, and they'll list tickets with the best deals. When you go search for your tickets for those events, they stay saved so you can go back and check on them again as the date for your event gets closer and see if the tickets have maybe gotten cheaper. My favorite feature is the panoramic view that you get when you go on the app. You click on for a seat and you get the exact view what you're going to get from that seat, so you know exactly what you're looking at. And you also can get the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We continue our off-season player profiles with a look at Kings forward Trevor Moore. The 29-year-old just completed his fourth full season with the LA Kings since being acquired in a trade with the Toronto Maple Leafs for Kyle Clifford and Jack Campbell. Now, Moore was also brought over from the Maple Leafs along with a draft pick that turned into Alex Laferriere. So I would say Trevor Moore and Alex Laferriere for Kyle Clifford and Jack Campbell. Pretty good trade for GM Rob Blake. Got to give him credit for that one. After scoring 10, 17, and then 10 goals, Moore exploded last season with 31 goals and a career-high 57 points. Moore had 5 goals in October, 6 in November, 6 in December, 4 in January. Then he cooled off with a combined 5 goals in both February and March before finishing with 5 goals in April. Now, the question is, was this a career year for Trevor Moore, or is this the Trevor Moore we're going to see going forward? I'm leaning towards this is the Trevor Moore we're going to see going forward, mostly because of the types of goals Trevor Moore scored last season. This was not one of those seasons that some players have where everything just goes right. It wasn't like he was just throwing pucks on net and they were deflecting off of defenders' skates or just through screens, or maybe he got rebounds that went right on his stick and he was able to put them in. No, Trevor Moore last year scored a lot of high-skilled goals. He was picking the top corner on the rush. He was making a move to the net and scoring on a backhand. I honestly thought he was going to get 40 goals last season before he went into that mini slump a little bit later in the year. Obviously, a lot is going to be expected of Trevor Moore going forward now, but I do think he's ready to handle it. He's in his prime of his career, and he's shown that he can score, like I said, highly skilled goals. He's going to probably play on the Kings' second line again. Certainly, I don't anticipate anything changing there. I think he's proved he's a top 6 forward. He played on the Kings' second power play unit last year for the most part. Now, that is one area that he is going to certainly look to improve on. He only had 2 power play goals all season and none after November the 8th. Now, it is possible he could get some number one unit power play time with the likely departure of Victor Arvidsson. That remains to be seen. But again, that's certainly an area that he can improve on and keep that goal scoring going forward. So the great majority of his goals, was it 29 of his 31 goals were scored at even strength. So hopefully he can get the power play numbers up. Also, he did only have 1 goal in 5 playoff games. Now, 5 games is not a lot, and he did score a goal. But when you're the team's leading goal scorer and you're playing the most important games of the season, you'd like to see probably a little bit more from Moore, no pun intended. And I don't recall a lot of great scoring chances for Trevor Moore that maybe, the goaltenders just made saves on. He wasn't too noticeable in the postseason against Edmonton, in my opinion. So improving on the power play, obviously coming up bigger if the Kings do get a chance at playoff hockey once again. A couple of things that certainly you'd like to see out of Trevor Moore, but overall a fantastic regular season for Trevor Moore. And can he continue to produce like this going forward? I think he can. I'm leaning towards yes, he can. And if so, again, you have to give GM Rob Blake some credit here for getting a 30-goal scorer in his prime signed for the next 4 seasons at $4.2 million per season. Now you can say, and I wouldn't even push back on it, that Blake kind of lucked into the deal, that it was very unlikely that he had the foresight to say Trevor Moore's about to score 30. Let's make sure we get him signed for the next few years at a reasonable price. So he did sign him before he had his breakout season. But I mean, we got to give credit. If you're going to criticize someone, like if Trevor Moore was a complete failure at this point, let's say he just fell off a cliff and scored 5 goals or something, was just a terrible player, obviously people would be criticizing Rob Blake for saying, why would you sign this guy, blah, blah, blah. So you do have to give him credit when things work out, whether it was something he may have kind of lucked into or not. I'm pretty sure that Rob Blake didn't see Trevor Moore being a 30-goal scorer this past season, but was optimistic that he could continue to be a good role player, score maybe in the 20s, which would have been a career year for him anyway. But he certainly took off, did Trevor Moore. And again, you got to give credit to Rob Blake for making that signing. And again, having a 30-goal scorer at $4.2 million per season, if Trevor Moore could continue to do that, is certainly great value for the LA Kings. Now, I'm sure you're well aware, Trevor Moore is from Thousand Oaks, and he is one of 14 active NHL players that were born in California. 54 NHL players all time have been born in the Golden State. Now, he would have been the highest California-born goal scorer last season, if not for some guy named Austin Matthews and his 69 goals. You may or may not know Austin Matthews, raised in Arizona, but he was born in San Ramon, California, which is up in the Bay Area. So Trevor did have to settle for second place on the California-born goal-scoring list from last season. Trevor is actually number 5 on the list of all-time goal scorers for players born in California, behind Matthews, Jason Zucker from Newport Beach, Jason Robertson from Arcadia, and Matt Nieto from Long Beach. Now, I was not born in California. I was actually born in Honolulu, Hawaii, where my dad was stationed in the Army, but I was raised in California, and I think it's pretty cool to have a California and specifically a Southern California native playing on the LA Kings. So I can't deny that maybe I do root a little bit more for Trevor Moore because he is a local guy. And I know occasionally we probably roll our eyes because it seems like every time he scores a goal, we have to say Thousand Oaks, Trevor Moore. But I hope we hear that about 30 more times come next season. I'm pretty confident that Trevor Moore, the Trevor Moore that we saw last season, is the real Trevor Moore. But obviously he's going to have to go out and follow it up and prove me correct, which I certainly hope he does. And the Kings are going to need Trevor Moore to return to the form that he had last year, if they're in fact going to return to the Stanley Cup playoffs. We have news sort of on a possible uniform change for the LA Kings, and an old familiar name may be landing in a new place. We'll give you the details on that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Indeed partners you up on every step of the way of the hiring process. You can find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Indeed Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of qualified candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. If you follow the show on X or Twitter at Locked On LA Kings, you probably saw me repost this today. But there's a site that I've mentioned a few times since I've taken over doing this show. Is that a word, taken over? I don't think so. Since I took over the show. And the site is called Aesthetics. It's spelled ICETHETICS. And they do a fun job of keeping track of all things hockey logos and hockey uniforms. And they reported earlier today, and they put out a little video on various logo and uniform potential changes around the league. And it did include the LA Kings. And it basically reiterated what I've talked about and what I've heard for the LA Kings. And I know we had an email about this on our feedback show last Friday about possible uniform logo changes for the LA Kings. And they basically, the aesthetics people basically kind of, again, doubled down on some of the things that I've heard, that the LA Kings are going to change their primary logo from that home plate logo to the Chevy logo. And if you're watching on YouTube, that Chevy logo is the logo that's on my hat I'm wearing right now. That was the logo the Kings had back in the 80s and 90s when Wayne Gretzky joined the team, and the Kings moved away at that time from the Forum blue and gold and the crown logo to that Chevy logo and the silver and black. We did get a bit of a preview of possibly what the Kings are going to do for next season. The Kings had that white jersey, which if you're watching on YouTube, I'm also wearing as well, although you can't really see it. But basically the white jersey that had the sparkly colors at the bottom of the jersey and on the sleeve, and then they would wear the chrome dome helmets with those white jerseys. Apparently, they're going to go to a version of that next year. Now, it might not have the sparkly silver on the sleeve or the bottom of the jerseys, but the logo in the middle of the jersey is apparently the logo that the Kings are going to go full-time next year on both the home and the road jersey. So it's not going to be an alternate third jersey. It's going to be the full-time logo for the Kings as far as home and road main uniforms. So I know that there is nostalgia surrounding that home plate logo because the Kings wore that logo and that was their uniforms when they won both their Stanley Cups. I get that. But that said, I honestly never really liked that logo all that much. I've always been partial to a crown on the front of the jerseys. I have a long wish the Kings would go back to the Forum blue and gold, even though that's not the LA Kings that I grew up with. But I just think those uniforms look so sharp. I think they're just amazing. But the change that they're talking about, I'm okay with that change. I do think it's better. Now, I became a fan of the Kings during that Gretzky era. So that's the logo that I kind of know the Kings with. So it's kind of cool to go back to that. Now, is it possible the Kings could have a Forum blue and gold alternate sweater for next season? Don't know about that. I hope the answer is yes, because again, I love those colors. And I know there is a fair amount of trepidation with the NHL moving over to Fanatics. Just ask Major League Baseball how well that transition has gone for them. Not well. So I certainly get all that, but still excited for the apparent news, which again, we continue to get more and more evidence that the Kings are in fact making that logo switch, moving away from that home plate logo to more of the Chevy logo. So it's being backed up by the folks over at Aesthetics who do a good job following that. If you haven't seen it, and if you're on social media, again, go to Aesthetics and check out the video that they posted. I have mentioned that from time to time, I like to keep track of what's going on around the league and see if any of the stories that are out there have any kind of possible connection to the LA Kings. Well, I did see today that Las Vegas Golden Knights play-by-play man Dave Gaucher announced he is staying in Las Vegas. What does that mean? Well, there were reports that he was going to return to Boston and become the Bruins play-by-play announcer, where he was previously their radio play-by-play guy, because Jack Edwards, their longtime TV play-by-play man, has had to retire because of health issues. But apparently that's not the case. Again, Dave Gaucher is not going to go back to Boston. He's going to stay in Vegas. And so it appears that the front runner for the job is now a familiar name for us, and that would be former LA Kings TV play-by-play man Alex Faust. Now, he did fill in for Jack Edwards when he had missed some games because of some health issues this past season. Apparently was pretty well received. Faust is from the East Coast. He went to Northeastern University in Boston, so there's a connection there. I think he'd be a terrific choice. I'm actually a big fan of his work. I know some Kings fans out there were not fans of Alex Faust. I don't know why, but I have grudgingly come to the realization that not everyone likes what I like, which is weird, but apparently true. Anyway, it looks like Alex Faust is again the front runner to be the next play-by-play man for the Boston Bruins, which I think is a great gig. I'd love to see him get it. Original Six franchise, great sports town that obviously loves their hockey. So I hope he gets the job. I think he's really good. I was sad to see him leave the Kings. No disrespect to Nick Nixon, but we'll see. It looks like Alex Faust is going to be the next play-by-play guy for the Boston Bruins. That is going to do it for today's show. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day. Of course, coming up on Friday, it is our fan feedback show. Your thoughts on anything going on with the LA Kings. Maybe you want to chime in on the Akil Thomas signing or any of the signings they made recently. We did have that kind of question of the week. Do you feel any differently about the Kings and how their season ended now that the Oilers are in the Stanley Cup final? Any thoughts on the logo change or anything else that's on your mind? It's all up to you. If you want to send an email for the show, the email address is lockedoneddie, EDDIE, @gmail.com. And you can always leave your comments on the YouTube episodes as well, which help the algorithm for people to find the show. We really appreciate that. And you can also stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings, and you could submit questions that way as well if you would like. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings go.